Okay, folks, it's March 1st, I think, I hope. Anyway, your next set of notes following on the committees of correspondence and the First Continental Congress is Second Continental Congress. And of course, this is section 4 of E Pluribus Unum. These are the sections that talk about how many colonies became one country. All right, set up your page. You know what to do. So, how did we get to here? How did we get to this Second Continental Congress? Well, I will tell you that the first place, the way we got to it was during the First Continental Congress, we said we would plan a Second Continental Congress. Well, if anybody thought, well, maybe that's not going to happen, oh, well, it certainly did. And the reasons it did are many, but a couple of them are this. First of all, the Boston Massacre in 1775 was not seen as a big, huge, aggressive thing on the part of the British government and or soldiers. It was seen as a mistake, a one-time happening, a situation caused by hot tempers on both sides of the situation. But, as we know, April 19th, 1775, you know, that April morning, changed everything because the British Army actively initiated violence against the colonial militia in Lexington and Concord. And then again, the Imperial, that's another way of calling it, sounds like Star Wars, doesn't it? The governmental army was storming and attacking Boston again. Remember, from Lexington and Concord, they went back to Boston. They, inhabit's not the right word. What's the word when a government, when the troops hang out there? Ian, what's that word? He's not listening. I think he has his earphones in. But anyway, they were in Boston. They were not retreating. They were holding it hostage, basically. And they started attacking Boston again in May of 1775. The colonists then had no choice but to deal with this at the Second Continental Congress that had been planned in November of 1774. Now, I put two pictures up here. Remember that the 1868 rendition of the Boston Massacre, the top picture, is more accurate as to what happened. Not the one by Paul Revere, but the one by Paul Revere is the one that causes the colonists in the other colonies to be more sympathetic to Boston. I also included the picture from Assassin's Creed because Lexington and Concord, and this is supposedly a screenshot of that battle, is so important to our history, we find it in video games. So let's keep that in mind. So the question the colonists have to deal with now is how to respond to the aggressors. You know, their own government is aggressive toward them. So the first decision made at the, well, one of the most important decisions made at the Second Continental Congress is to form a Continental Army. George Washington of Virginia, we know him, is appointed to be the Army's supreme commander. He accepts that appointment and refuses to take any pay because the reality is the group of colonies don't have like a group account, group bank account. So that's the next thing. How do we pay all these people who are signing the muster books? How do we get supplies for all of those people who are going to be serving in the Army? One of the things the Second Continental Congress did was approve of printing money, and they approved of printing money that could be used anywhere in the colonies. And the other thing that they did was they formed a committee to meet with foreign governments in case help might be needed. And the kind of help mostly that they were looking for was financial. Okay, so they did two important things in basically starting up our government. They also became an official governing body in order to deal with the British aggression. So they held a vote and said, we are officially in charge of these 13 colonies, even though they're not yet calling themselves a country. Now, just like in the previous two Congresses, the Stamp Act Congress and then the First Continental Congress, which was most recent, they reach out to King George and try to solve things peacefully, even though shots have already been fired. You still have a big delegation that wants to remain part of the British government and wants this all to stop. So they write what's known as the Olive Branch Petition. If you're aware of biblical allusions, an olive branch in the Bible is considered a sign of peace. If I send you an olive branch, that means I want peace. So they write the Olive Branch Petition, and they send it off to King George. What I have there is part of that letter. It's the conclusion of the letter. At the conclusion, therefore, of the late war, the most glorious of the late war is a reference to the 7 years French Indian War. The most glorious and advantageous that ever had been carried on by British arms, your loyal colonists having contributed to its success by such repeated and strenuous exertions as frequently procured them the distinguished approbation. In other words, we fought valiantly, and you were always praising us, your Majesty, of the late king, the previous king, and of Parliament. Doubted not but that they should be permitted, with the rest of the empire, to share in the blessings of peace and the emoluments of victory and conquest. We want peace, but we also want the spoils of victory and conquest. They're asking once again to be considered a full part of the empire, and to be allowed to do things like settle on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, it was a very nice letter. However, okay, so they send him that olive branch petition, and King George III not only ignores the petition, but he sends out a royal order that all colonists who are involved in fighting against the British government or the British troops, that they should be considered rebels and therefore treated as traitors. He also hired Hessian mercenaries. Those are professional soldiers from the area we now know as Germany, to help against the colonists. Talk about an insult. How could the mother country hire foreigners to kill them to get them under control? And on top of that, the colonists considered these foreigners to be brutes, to be lowlifes, basically. This move by King George III led to the moderate, let's be peaceful, make up with the British government group, to lose all ground. So there was no more, let's try to make up with King George. King George III, with his refusal to look at the olive branch petition and calling them all traitors and hiring the Hessians, handed the radicals the perfect argument and the perfect I told you so for declaring independence. People like John Adams could perfectly say, I told you so. In the picture, you'll notice there's the one red coat, the one with the drums. The rest are wearing blue, but they're clearly dressed up. They're clearly using British weapons. Those are the Hessians, and they're the ones that were hired, that were being paid money to go and kill the colonists who were involved in the altercations or in the battles. So now we demand independence, and this is a picture of, this is a Currier and Ives depiction of George Washington being appointed commander-in-chief. It was drawn about 100 years after the fact, but it's still a primary source because it's a reporting of the incident. It's a look back at the incident type thing. Anyway, all members of the Second Continental Congress were wanted men because they were seen as traitors to the crown. These men all wanted all to end well, but they saw that the only way for things to end well would be to fight and to declare independence. And we know they'll do that in July of 1776. But first, they need to get a little common sense. All right, you know what to do from here.